in our mythology, in our ancient scriptures, our gender roles are actually equal. We don't have premium on parenting. Matlab parent ke naam pe you can have a cow, tree, mother, river, grass, stone, ghada. Anybody can be a mother, right? You don't need to be a woman to be a mother. We don't have any relationship which is about the male being the rescuer. In fact, more often than not, it's the woman who's the rescuer. The only thing that we actually place a premium on, or the male female relationship as represented in our mythology, in our texts, scriptures, etc., has always been that of partnership. Very independent agency and very independent partnership. So, whether it's our gods and goddesses, whether it's the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, and why it's very fascinating, I'll just choose a very interesting story to bring this out. So, my mother and I have actually just co authored a book on the Panchakanya. So the Panchakanya are Ahalya, Draupadi, Kunti, Tara, Mandodari. These are all 5 women who have had, not only are they not virgins, they're called Panchakanya. So not only are they not virgins, but they've all had more than one relationship. I'll just use Ahalya to bring out this whole context bit. So the Ahalya story, bare bones fact is that Ahalya was the first woman on earth, extremely beautiful. Brahma gifted her to sage Gautam. Gautam raised her, and after he raised her, he brought her back to Brahma and said, when she reached puberty, and said, okay, here I've raised her. Brahma, very pleased with the raising of Ahalya, said, okay, very good, you've raised her well, now you can have her for your wife. So Gautam says, okay. Indra, on the other hand, is very outraged by the fact that here's the prettiest creature on earth, she needs to be mine. Gautam and Ahalya have a long life, they have a son, they raise an ashram together. And then now here's when the story gets fuddled. And so bare bones, Indra comes into Ahalya at some point of time in the morning. Their relationship is consummated. Gautam finds out, comes back. She's cursed to become a stone. And Ram then redeems her. This is bare bones. Now, that's how the narrative shifts. In the Rig Veda, this story of Ahalya and Indra is this wonderful story where Indra comes to Ahalya and seduces her. And it's an incredibly beautiful seduction scene between Indra and Ahalya where he says, I will have you. And thus they consummate their relationship. Gautam comes back. Ahalya goes to Gautam and says, you have fulfilled me as a daughter, a mother, a wife, but now I have known fulfillment as a woman. And having thus been fulfilled, I withdraw my senses and engagement for the world. I don't need to experience anything else. And therefore, it's that turning to the unfeeling stone. Right? So that's the Rigvedic version where there's absolute agency, where she controls her narrative. As society evolved, by the time we've reached Valmiki and Ramayana, because by now our social structures have become more male dominated, in the Valmiki Ramayana, this scene changes to Indra deceiving Ahalya, comes in the guise of Gautam, and Gautam thus comes back and says, Gautam is upset, and therefore Gautam curses Ahalya to become the stone and curses Indra with 500 other curses that need to happen. Because by now he's the husband owner. Come to 2000 later and Tulsidas, and by the time we are at Manas, by this time the narrative is about the alpha male in power. By now we are parochial, patriarchal, and social norms have changed. So by this time, Indra has raped Ahalya. And because she's Gautam's property and Gautam comes back, Ahalya is cursed to be stoned, and Indra is cursed with like one of the most hideous, obnoxious curses that you can have, that you will have 1,000 vulva over your eyes, over your body, and things like that. Okay, so the narrative, Ganesh, and the reason I mention this and bring out the story is to say that the narrative of the gender relationship and the power dynamics has actually evolved as our social order evolved. But if you go back to the origin and think about it, we have the world's largest living cults on the feminine divinity. We have 18 days where we only celebrate the feminine divine. We celebrate the feminine, and it doesn't mean celebrate the female. but the principles of the female in Navdurga, in Ashtalakshmi, in Knowledge and Saraswati, we celebrate. We have something called the Dasha Mahavidyas, where, by the way, there's no physicality to this at all. So the Dasha Mahavidyas, there's one who's a widow and old and haggard. There is one who's young and pretty. There is one who looks like a crane. We have celebrated all forms of femininity. We have the Chaucer Yoginis, the Panchakanya, the Panchasati. So we, in our most primal, visceral, like I said, the civilizational memory and the blood DNA, we have celebrated the concept of femininity as equal. We say that, quite like Jung and the anima and the animus, these are not about physical representations, but the qualities inside of you. We have the Ardhanareshwara.
Paraphrase what you're saying, Eka, by saying that, look, we can't blame history or mythology for who we are. So if there is a
Yeah.
problem today of women's participation, there's a problem exactly what she said about, almost perceiving as males and females that, look, there is a certain place in the home for what men will do and what women will do.
Yes.
We have only ourselves to blame and we can't look back on this.
Ourselves in recent times. And recent times. So maybe we need to reclaim our narrative and not change our narrative. So I love that bit that Romaji said about, learning, unlearning and relearning. So maybe it's time we relearned ourselves, unlearning the recent past and stepped into our civilization.